Hello, and welcome to As Built, the podcast about architecture firms and buildings and how both get built. I am Patience Jones, your co-host. With me, as ever, is
Brian Jones.
Your other co-host. Thank you for joining us. Today's episode is the next in our series that we call Tech Stack, and the topic of today's episode is everybody's favorite, web hosting.
Can't talk about it enough.
Can't talk about it enough.
Or usually ever.
I think that's the problem, is that it's something that nobody likes to talk about because half the people who don't want to talk about it don't want to talk about it because they're not totally sure what it means. And the other half don't want to talk about it because they know what it means and they are not interested in it.
Yeah.
So it's a great topic for a podcast.
Yeah. It's what people will be so excited about.
Yes. Get your popcorn.
I mean, the reason we decided to tackle this is that your website is on 24 hours a day, and it is most frequently the first interaction that people have with your firm outside of meeting somebody that is from your firm. But even after that, they're likely to go and see the work that you've been up to. So it is a crucial and always on resource. So it is important to note the thing that powers that as a crucial resource that needs to be vetted and thought about.
Well, when you said, it's on 24/7, I found myself cringing because that's sort of the issue with hosting, right? Is it your site is supposed to be on 24/7, but if you don't have hosting that's reliable, it's not going to be. And for people who do hosting or are involved with hosting, everybody knows that for a variety of reasons, no hosting platform has what we call uptime of 100%.
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Websites will be down for nanoseconds, milliseconds throughout a month, throughout a year for all kinds of security upgrades and hosting upgrades and platform upgrades. And that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is your site is down for 3 hours for no reason or surprise reasons. That's where hosting can become a problem.
Absolutely. So let's break this down into a few things that you need to think about. So the first is who's responsible for thinking about hosting within your firm?
Well, before we even do that, because of the many conversations that we've had with people, I think we should start with, what is website hosting?
So website hosting is the space that you rent for a monthly fee that allows the resources that are your website to be seen by the world at large.
On the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
If you can build a website, if it's not hosted anywhere, it won't be on the internet.
There are services that you can get that are both web hosting and web presentation platforms, and those are out there, and people have a variety of opinions about those, but they also qualify as hosting in some ways, and for this conversation should be thought about in that same way.
So your website is not your URL, or sorry, here we go. Your web hosting is not the same as your URL, and your web hosting is not the same as your website, and your web hosting is not the same as your email.
Yes.
So we want to put that out so that we're all on the same page.
And that is really important because sometimes in firms, the people that make the decision about where you host is made by the same people that decide how your email is functioning. And in truth, those may be serving very different needs within your firm. One is about communication and reliability in a particular way, and one is about the ability to communicate with the outside world. They both are to a lesser extent, but I mean, they may need different backbones that support them.
Well, and the reason it's important to know what web hosting is and who hosts your website is because if your website does have any sort of issue at all, the person who's trying to fix it is going to ask you, where's your website hosted? Who hosts it? And the answer is not, well, here's our domain name.
Yeah.
Or, this is the person in charge of our email. There will be an entity that is your web host. You
Yep.
need to know who that is. If you don't know who that is, hit pause,
Mhm.
go find out, and come back and listen to the rest of this episode when you do.
So there's the people involved in making the decisions. The next piece of the puzzle is what sort of resource do you need to have in place? So the most inexpensive plans that are on the market tend to be for what are considered shared resources. So you are sharing your bandwidth with a bunch of other websites, and it could be hundreds or thousands of other websites that you're sharing one pot of bandwidth with, and that's how they arrive at the inexpensive price point.
And you will probably never know,
Right.
because on a shared hosting plan, nobody says, this is the number of other websites that you're sharing with, and this is who they are.
Yep.
You have no idea who you're sharing with.
So the reason that that might matter is that if your website is slow or sluggish or not performing, it may be because resources are being used by other people that are sharing your same amount of bandwidth that are making it hard for your website to be served in a timely manner. So it's just something to note that that's a trade-off for the less expensive plans that are on the market, and that may be what you can afford and what you have access to, but that is somewhat of the trade-off there.
The flip side, or the other option, the alternative to shared hosting, is what's called dedicated hosting, which means that you get your own, let's call it a box. You get your own box. Your bandwidth is 100% your bandwidth. You're the only site using it. If you need more bandwidth, you buy more bandwidth. If you need to scale down, you scale down. But as Brian noted, that dedicated plan is usually more expensive than a shared plan.
Yep. So let's talk about other features that are important to think about relative to website hosting. So the backup process. How often is your website backed up? And is it something that you can download as a offline resource in case something catastrophic should happen to the web host itself? Not every hosting plan, unfortunately, carries that option with it. But it's something to be mindful of when picking yours out, that you have that as a resource, because you invested a fair amount of resources in creating your website and time, or hiring somebody to do that for you. So it's important to make sure that that is a protected resource.
Well, and if something does happen to your live website so that it's not functioning, and the answer from the people who run it is like, look, it's going to take us, a week to get this fixed. Ideally, you have a backup of your site that you are able to download from your hosting company and put up that backup while the other version of your site is being fixed, so that you don't just have like a blank screen or a site not available for a week while it's being fixed.
And kind of the last, and this is in the wonderful to have but not essential, would be, as you change as a firm, you're probably going to need to update your website. That may involve building a new version of things. So the ability to have what's called a production environment, which is the version that people see, and a staging environment where you can store a copy that you're working on until it's ready to become the production environment. That's an extra feature that frequently on dedicated plans is something that you can find, or at least purchase as an additional resource.
And it's important to know, especially in the times in which we live, where physically your site is being hosted. Because yes, in the interwebs, we all live everywhere and nowhere. And so your website lives everywhere. But there is a physical location where the physical hardware of your site server is located. Depending on where that is, your site may be more vulnerable to going down because of climate events, geopolitical events, ransomware. What you want to know is, in what part of the world are my servers? Am I comfortable with that? Are there redundant servers somewhere in case those servers go down? And is the place where my servers are located someplace that is a really big target for any manner of ne'er-do-well activities?
Well, on a less dire note,
Always dire.
yeah, I
You
know.
got to be dire.
So on a less dire note, I would go the route of like, how fast can somebody access your website, and that
It's also true.
the location of your where things are can impact that for sure. And something to note is that as you go with providers that are globalized in the sense that they have resources dedicated around the planet, that can be a really great option for you because it allows your website to be distributed among their network and accessible at basically the same speed wherever people happen to be on the planet trying to access your website. So, again, part of probably a more premium priced hosting package, but something, especially for a larger sized firm, something that you should be mindful of and not just leave to chance.
Well, and the site speed, so the time in which it takes your site to load to anybody who happens to pull it up, that is not exclusively but largely impacted by your hosting. And so, to Brian's point, if it takes longer for somebody to see your site on their website, on their screen when they type in your URL because your hosting is shared, or it's having to come from a really long ways away, or the hosting itself is just really slow, that results in a not great experience for the people trying to look at your website. It also can cause Google to take note of the fact that your site loads slowly. And while Google doesn't technically penalize you for a slow site, it certainly isn't going to boost you any in search results. So you sort of inadvertently create some problems for yourself.
So, the big takeaways, the first one I would say for this are that not all hosting plans are created equal. And it's really important to know for the investment that you're putting into it every month, are you getting an equivalent back to your company and your firm that is positioning your firm with a web resource that is, helpful to your business?
And yes and no, because somebody might say, well, I pay $2 a month for hosting and I'm definitely getting $2 a month worth. That may be, you shouldn't be spending $2 a month on hosting. You should be spending a lot more. You should be spending like 25. So I think there's also, though, argue is that whatever investment you're making, is that you might be getting a return on it, but are you making enough of an investment? So, if you're putting $2 a month toward hosting, you may be getting $2 back, but that's probably not enough for you to be getting good, solid hosting. There was a story that we know about only because it was in the newspaper, where there was a hosting company that was basically reselling other hosting. So like they would buy hosting from hosting companies and then they would resell it. And sometimes they were even like the second or third reseller. But it was just one person who was doing this. And then that one person left the country on a vacation and didn't do what they were supposed to do to make sure that the sites would still work. And so like all of these websites in the city went down and nobody could reach this person. Nobody could get their sites resolved. They went to the primary host companies who said, listen, that's not our problem. We sold that to this person. And I think it ended up with like people were like camped outside that person's office building, waiting for them to come back from their vacation so that they could get their websites up. So don't end up in that position. Hosting isn't a fun expense. It doesn't make you excited about anything, but it is really, really, really important.
And it should be treated as such. And otherwise, it spending a little too little upfront may end up with expensive problems down the road.
And ask a lot of questions.
Yep.
It's okay to ask. If you don't understand what you're getting, if you don't understand the difference between packages, ask questions. And if people aren't willing to answer those questions, then that's sort of an indicator that maybe that's not the best provider for you. So thank you for joining us for today's Tech Stack, for letting us host you. Ha ha ha. And we will see you next time.